The day starts just like any other. You log into your computer to check your socials and browse the internet. Soon you get a message from your friend. It looks a little shady, but that's okay. Your friend assures you it's worth the risk. You've never had a virus anyway, and antivirus software nowadays is so much stronger. So you click download and run the game. Right now, you've just injected yourself with Horizon Focus. Disguising itself as what appears to be a harmless executable file, the Windows keylogger creates 3 new files: data.txt and info.txt in the Windows temp folder, and Windows Driver Fountain User Mode Driver Framework Host Process.exe in the startup folder. Obfuscated from general view deep within the essential files of the computer, these 3 components allow Horizon to capture and record a victim's keystrokes, along with the GMT timestamp and current program name that the user is on. But don't expect to know this at all. The inconspicuous info.txt contains only a few random numbers, an integer, a Unix timestamp, and another integer. The more conspicuous document.txt contains a jumble of letters and numbers, probably just program junk. A quick Google search on Windows Driver Fountain reveals it's a beneficial Windows tool. Better not touch it. Besides, Windows Security doesn't even notice it after multiple scans. Maybe downloading another antivirus would help. The game's executable file is a cleverly disguised Trojan horse, existing only to deliver the initial package. It first checks for the existence of info.txt. If the file exists, the executable will only run the game. If, however, the file doesn't exist, the executable will begin copying Horizon Focus over to the startup folder for Windows, before running the program under the name Windows Driver Fountain and deleting the original. The executable then runs the game as intended by the user. Horizon begins by establishing a keyboard hook with the user's keyboard. There it scans in codes for the user's keystrokes, capitalizing and shifting when necessary. Once a key is scanned, Horizon needs to check for a session. If there is no existing session, Horizon will make one. A session consists of a session file called info.txt. This session file contains 3 lines, each with a level of importance. The first is the XOR key, a piece of the puzzle used for encrypting the data Horizon has captured and recording it in a TXT file. That way, should the file be discovered, its true intent would be obfuscated by the encryption. The second is the Unix time for the start session. This is used to determine when Horizon should export the encrypted data and start a new session. Always one step ahead, it's imperative that Horizon continually makes new sessions in order to prevent predictability and make it difficult to determine the information it's storing. Additionally, frequent construction of new sessions allows for Horizon to remain in close contact to the host machine, sending at best a document in 1 minute or at worst 57 minutes. The final value determines if Horizon has already been executed on this computer. This is to prevent the game's executable file from continually cloning Horizon into the startup folder. The XOR key is constructed by using the randc function to generate a number from 0 to 168. That's because the XOR key is only half of the puzzle. The other half lies within the names of all 169 League of Legends champions, whose names are used as the XOR key. The XOR key is a component of the XOR encryption, which essentially flips the bits of a character based on the bits of the key. All 169 League of Legends champions are put into 2 different arrays, with a random number generated being the index of that array. Because of the values that can be obtained from XOR encryption, it's possible to generate characters which correlate to unprintable ASCII characters. Therefore, an extra layer of encryption needs to be added. In this case, representing the data obtained in hexadecimal value allows for each character to now take up 2 characters, which correlate to its hexadecimal value. The Unix time generated serves 2 purposes. The time serves as the starting point for when Horizon initially begins logging keystrokes, but it also serves as the endpoint for when a new session should be generated, and consequently a new champion chosen. This increases the unpredictability of the information provided, as well as further obfuscating the code should any curious users open the document. The endpoint is determined as the This means randomly generated keys will therefore correlate to champions, which in turn results in upload times at intervals based on the keys. Upon detecting a victim's keystroke, Horizon's keyboard hook obtains a key code of that character. If it is written within the printable ASCII range, the output to the document will be of that value. If not, the output to the document will signal that a key code was read rather than a displayable character. This allows the host to see the victim's use of modifier keys. The program will then get the current Unix time and use functions in the Windows library to determine the title of the active application the user is on. This information is then encrypted using XOR encryption and the generated key, and further obfuscated with hexadecimal conversion before being added to the file. Upon identifying the previous session has expired, Horizon will overwrite the previous session, generating a new key and updating the starting Unix time, before shipping off both the old session and the document text file. In order to ship off the data, Horizon needs to create an SMTP request to Gmail, upload the relevant files to an email body, and send it to a host-controlled email address. To avoid detection, malware often exploits vulnerabilities within systems using backdoors and writing scripts to provide admin access. Horizon is a bit different. See, it capitalizes on the user's desire for whatever executable they want to run. This can easily be changed too. Simply package the copy file inside a games folder, rewrite the executable to a different name and with a different icon, and run the desired executable. Ultimately, this allows Horizon to be adapted to a variety of different markets: children, teenagers, adults. While the sample size is limited by the operating system, approximately 73% of all desktops use Windows as their operating system. That's a lot of computers, and because Horizon piggybacks off Desire, it's undeniable many will click. Horizon isn't actually that clever though. Despite embedding itself on startup, it fails to maintain its position should the user discover the suspicious executable hidden within their startup folder. Additionally, Horizon doesn't use any exploits or backdoors to gain access. From personal experience constructing a Python keylogger, using an interpreter language meant antivirus software and Windows security can easily identify the lines of code scanning and recording the user's keystrokes. Some research into malware languages reveals C has a variety of properties, making it highly effective. It was also a comfortable language. It would be extremely impractical to request the user to install external requirements such as Python. An executable file is far more suitable to remain hidden. Detection is also concealed through purposeful obfuscation of data. If the malware were to leave data available for all to see, its intent would be exposed immediately. Therefore, it's imperative that Horizon obfuscates and conceals the data it wishes to save. Using misleading file names and copying Windows process names are all methods employed to prop up this Trojan horse. The first couple hours of planning out this project were under false assumptions. Due to a temporary hallucination and inability to fully read the prompt, I concluded that the project required the completion of 3 parts: teach something, analyze something, and make something. Truthfully, it still makes sense. Teach and analyze might take a combined total of 5 to 10 hours, with make being another 20 to 25. In reality, I needed all 30 hours on make. Regardless, I began planning with this in mind. The initial plan was to link all 3 of my components together. I would first produce a video presentation involving students of social engineering, accompanied with tricks, anecdotes, and research on the subject, ultimately teaching the art of being a massive liar. This included a relatively large list of methods hackers may use that revolved around social engineering. In Horizon's case, I believe it is considered baiting. This also included some additional time spent researching infamous system penetrations, which employed social engineering as the main entry to a system. Secondly, I would analyze a scene from Mr. Robot, a TV series focused almost entirely on cybersecurity, system penetration, and what it's like to be a black or grey hat hacker. As you can imagine, there are a multitude of scenes showcasing social engineering, ways the main character navigated situations, and truly embodied the mask he needed to wear. There was a lot less emphasis on this point, it was mainly the idea which I was hooked on. And finally, I would construct a keylogger, the successor to my failed Python keylogger. This time, I had better ideas. I knew it was possible to record someone's keystrokes without them knowing, but it was extremely hard to do so in Python. Therefore, a language change was needed. I went in with the mindset of using C due to my growing comfort with the language, as well as its ability to compile and mask its true intentions within an executable. I also knew I wanted extended functionality with this keylogger. This included the ability to record keystrokes, as well as a victim's browser history and current programs open. This was to be transported back to a host machine. I also knew Windows security generally didn't like unauthorized computers attempting to remote control the victim through sockets, so I needed a different way of communication. My original idea was to communicate to Google Drive using a dummy drive and email. That way, the system wouldn't notice any suspicious activity and I could still obtain the results. I also wanted to distribute it using social engineering, perhaps plug a rubber ducky into a friend's PC or infect my tutor under the disguise of attempting to present some work at a lecture. While the first two components may seem useless, it's important to understand a very solid chunk of time was spent brainstorming their properties, as well as the connections between components. Also, technically, they're a part of the learning process, as it emphasized the importance of reading the assignment. But once that hiccup was over, the process could truly begin. For this specific component, the idea was to begin with a rocket ship development approach. I would think, and continually add functionality onto the keylogger before letting it fly and slowly dropping off fuel reserves to send to orbit. Truthfully, the final product was to be a miserable shell of its ambitious past. I started off brainstorming ideas on the keylogger. My first drafts maintain a surprising amount of functionality compared to the final design, and there's clear evidence of evolution within the idea. I started off with ideas about headless browsers and obfuscation of the C code, along with zipping the file and providing support for other operating systems. I am very glad I did not do the last one. Some more ambitious ideas were there too, getting timestamps, browser history, and screen capturing. The following draft started to flesh out some more technical concepts. A legitimate way to capture a user's screen was identified, injection was also identified, demonstrating the clear link my thought process had to being a genuine representation of malware. Simply plugging in a USB into my friend's computer isn't enough to demonstrate how people get injected. I needed to come up with a real-world scenario in which someone would fall for the Trojan horse. The planning and designing phase also consisted of a few proper pieces of software documentation. Pseudocode, diagrams, schizophrenic rambling. Regardless, as with most freehand programming, I was kind of taking the prototyping development approach where I would produce a solution, think about it, and then work from there. Past experience was a pretty sizable factor in this. It initially pushed me away from using Python as my main language, as well as using sockets due to Windows Defender identifying the socket Python file and proceeding to eliminate it. Regardless, all this would culminate into the main aim of the project: steal someone's shit. Nah, just kidding. Obviously, it was to demonstrate the concept of both injection and infection. The overall aim was to demonstrate the incentives a victim may have to fall for a bad actor's tricks, as well as methods a bad actor may use to penetrate the system, extract valuable data, and export that data back to the host machine. In building this keylogger, I aim to teach how a hacker may disguise their malware and employ social engineering techniques to lure unsuspecting victims, as well as carry out an analysis as to the various techniques hackers may employ when capturing a victim's data. Additionally, keyloggers can be used as a tool to determine browsing habits of individuals and examine behavioral patterns online, all valuable data for a cybersecurity specialist in determining vulnerabilities and exploits. As with any great anime hero, I faced countless brutal foes upon this journey. The Professor of Procrastination, the Dame of Doom Scrolling, the Inquisitor of IBS. I'm just kidding. Because of how technically intense this project was, the vast majority of issues came from knowledge gaps. While I didn't concretely document the issues I faced along with timestamps, I do acknowledge in my notes document the knowledge gaps I had, more specifically a solution to upload the files. So I went in with the notion that this would definitely be an issue that I would encounter. What I didn't expect was the extreme frequency of this issue. To start off the development process, I basically pulled everything out of my brain and shoved it on the wall to examine. I noted I had some experience with keyloggers, but I wanted to switch to a different language. I also wanted to avoid the usage of sockets because previously Windows Security didn't really like it. Furthermore, I wanted a distribution method and a way to connect back to the host machine. These two aspects were significantly harder because it was uncharted territory. And so I set out with a multitude of questions that needed to be answered with some research. These questions or issues encountered will be listed in chronological order, which is basically the order in which I decided they were a problem that needed to be dealt with. The issue of Python being a meth bag with the label not meth on it was resolved by finding C was one of the best languages. This fit my own assumptions due to it being a compiled language, producing an executable, and not requiring the user to have the source code. More research into online forums revealed C was good for a multitude of reasons, so I had a pretty convincing argument. The next issue to address was connection to the host computer. My previous experience with sockets was basically copying a Python script that allowed remote control to another machine. Due to how easily antivirus can spot Python scripts, this failed miserably. The approach employed the use of sockets to establish this connection, and so the conclusion I made from this was sockets equals bad. Therefore, my understanding was I would need a different method of communication. Interestingly, I had the idea of a Google Drive. Because I wanted all of the information stored in a TXT file, I knew that the 15GB limit for a Google Drive would be plenty of storage. Requests or posts to Google Drive API are less suspicious, and I can remotely access the drive from the host computer. Additionally, this meant I could work around the knowledge gap of sockets and not have to learn about them, or not have to learn how to pass my application through a firewall. Overall, it seemed like the easier option to remain less suspicious while also keeping the project reasonable in terms of technical scope. I would shelve the idea away for now. Following this came the issue of hiding the malware. While I didn't have a concrete solution to this, the main idea was to hide it within an executable, game, or file. My notes reveal I clearly had some ideas. Again, this idea was shelved. I was merely listing the extra components of the system rather than its core functionality. Machine architecture wasn't really a debate. I settled almost instantly on Windows due to how many desktops use it as an OS. Also, I couldn't really test the application if I wrote it for Mac or Linux. I also noted most games are made for Windows anyway. Then came the issue of masking the malware's presence. How could I ensure the user never actually finds the malware or at least struggles to comprehend what it is? I found that running executables still produced a task in Task Manager. More technically competent users could easily identify a program called keylogger.exe, so I would need to hide it through a name change. This was pretty easy. Simply renaming the file or compiling it under a different name could help. I could then pick out any inconspicuous Windows process, name it after that process, and call it a day. When users go to research the file, it'll come up with Windows support explaining the functionality of that file, meaning users are more likely to leave the file alone. I'd also need to hide the text files. As stated in my ramblings, a user finding their keystrokes staring at them in data.txt is probably not the best look. Encryption came to mind, but I thought nothing of it for some time. After developing the program for some time, I managed to return a victim's keystrokes in integer format. This allowed me to identify codes for specific keys, as well as display characters. Bringing up the issue of backspace. Backspace had a specific code which could be recorded, but it may actually help to instead identify a backspace key and remove that key from the file. This would mean I would have to buffer the characters and delay appending them to the file, but then I started to think more. Under normal circumstances, a user inputs a character and presses backspace, deleting the character entirely. But what if they press backspace twice? If I hadn't recorded the character before that, I wouldn't be able to properly implement this. Additionally, what if the first key the user presses is backspace? How could I know what to delete? In the end, I decided not to handle backspace at all. It was just way too janky, and there wasn't really a clean way of doing it with so many edge cases and possibilities, like holding down backspace for too long, backspacing an empty document with no characters, and a whole world of trouble. However, some more thought further complicated this issue. What happens if a user is using a different keyboard? Different languages employ different keyboards and symbols. Could these be accounted for by Windows? The answer, yes, actually they can. Because the keyboard hook is exclusively for Windows, and due to the nature of Windows processing, every single keyboard will produce the same key code if they hit the letter A or the key Control, etc. Therefore, unknown keys could be identified based on attempting to input them manually through OSK, which interestingly provides the codes as well. Basically, the standardization of code collection meant I didn't actually have to worry about figuring out unknown codes until I came across them. I also reasoned that English-speaking countries generally have a high amount of internet traffic as well as lots of money. Also, there's lots of gullible people. Regardless, I shifted my focus towards making this compatible for basically every single Windows user in English-speaking countries. Special characters were edge cases which could be easily fixed later on, and I would be spending too much effort perfecting a fraction of the design. Finding the current window was also an issue. Under normal circumstances, a user opens Google, types in their banking website and enters their details. But there's still edge cases and issues that come from that. What if the user's tabs save? So upon opening Chrome, they only have to click the banking website without entering the website. This issue was actually completely solved by getting the window title to work. Normal processing of get window text gives the full name of the program being run, which is generally extremely intuitive and descriptive. This also meant I could eliminate the need to access a user's browser's history, as the website names were often included in the window description. We're circling back to encryption now. I realized that having the document in plain view was the worst idea conceivable, so I began researching encryption methods and other methods to hide my files. I wrongly assumed I should put the file in System32. It's actually meant to be in the startup folder. I would also need some method to decrypt the files once received. This is where XOR encryption came to mind. XOR encryption takes a specific key and flips the bits of a specified character depending on that key. This means the process can be done again to reverse its effects. So what could I use as the key? Keeping the key statically inside the exe file meant it was possible for reverse engineers to eventually find out exactly what it was in order to decrypt it. Additionally, the rand function could be easily deciphered based on the current machine time. I needed an extra layer of protection. That's when I thought of League of Legends. League of Legends is a popular video game with over 169 playable champions. Each of those champions have unique names, which in turn correspond to unique values. I decided it would be a good idea to take every single one of these champions, put them in an array, and randomly generate a key based on the champion name and the rand function. I ended up having to use 2 arrays and also mess with the XOR encryption because the encryption is based on a single character, not a string, but ultimately it produced what I believe to be a relatively secure method. I also noted that encryption could have hourly updates. Staying on one key for too long is too risky, so continually changing up the keys and sending over data allows for more confusion and assists with keeping the program secure, as well as the host updated on the victim's keystrokes. By recording the current Unix time and constructing an end time based on the key produced, the host could be updated in timestamps between 1 minute and 40 minutes. But then I saw the output file. Because of the way Notepad represents characters, as well as the way XOR encryption works, some characters actually correlated to modifier keys and unprintable characters. This meant they were lost entirely, leaving the final string a fraction of what it was. This meant losing valuable data and possibly even the entire keystroke. Not cool. I did some research and found that converting the resulting encrypted key into hexadecimal could help with representation. Sure, it doubled the size, but it was that or lose entire sections of data due to poor code, so putting it into hex was the solution. Now for the fun part, the emailing system. This was such a f***ing nightmare. My initial plan was the use of Google Drive. Seems simple enough, there's an existing API, Google Drive isn't suspicious, sounds like a good idea. Wrong. Paywall, sort of. Because of the mass frustration I had with this, I didn't properly document the issues I was going through, but I did record them. Dude, I can't figure this shit out. Review the specifications. What is the specifications? Why doesn't this fucking thing work? Please send an email. I'm going to. It says it's fucking supported. Dude. It seems I mostly had issues with finding solid documentation written in C, writing a request, Malwarebytes not liking what I was doing, and ultimately realizing I had to make a socket connection. There was also additional issues with library inclusion. But ultimately, I dropped Google Drive API. It was somewhat outdated and didn't really have enough information on it. I was also very reluctant to use curling. See, because I'm a complete smooth brain, adding libraries to my program seemed very difficult. Also, this would mean I would have to either dynamically include them or statically link them with my executables. I preferred to not use them at all and employ Windows built-in libraries. This would hopefully allow my program to be independent of external libraries and consequently able to run on many machines. Started researching some more. Responses included the usage of a Python script, the usage of other libraries, and a whole bunch of stuff I struggled to read. I'm not dyslexic, I don't have brain problems, I was just stubborn, and that was probably the reason why this was the worst issue. People had already made working email systems in C. The language is so old, someone is bound to have done whatever you wish for in C. But I was just way too stubborn to admit that I needed external libraries, constantly trying to find ways to email without needing them. Eventually, I found a solution. The way email works is essentially usage of Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP. You make a request, you authenticate the request, and then you send over your details. The issue is, it's so f***ing old. People don't bother writing up solutions in plain C because there's already a million different external libraries you can import and use with 100 times less effort. I was just too stubborn to do that. I was so convinced that I could make it work, and I almost did. Using sockets, I could make a request to SMTP for Gmail and establish a connection, but I just couldn't get past the start TLS command. Apparently, it requires a handshake to connect back to the server and upgrade the connection to TLS to ensure it's secure. But for some reason, I don't think that's possible in C. TLS handshakes are best done with external libraries. See, if I just dropped the stubborn act, I could learn how to establish this handshake, set up the stupid email, and receive a response. But I didn't. I continued to persist and find more solutions. This resulted in a lot more time wasting trying to learn how everything worked, finding solutions, getting frustrated, and ultimately not actually getting the thing done. That was my mistake. Being stubborn, not being open-minded. So after trying curl requests to send an email, I decided to bite the bullet and actually read the documentation. Yeah, it took me that long to read a pretty essential part of my project. The curl API literally has examples in the documentation. Someone made examples for how to send an email in C. So after installing the required libraries, reading the documentation, completely copying the code and compiling, it was that easy. Not quite. In reality, while I had gotten it to send emails, the formatting I used was slightly incorrect and the documentation helped correct the payload to be sent. After getting frustrated again with file sending, reading the documentation again, I finally managed to send over the required documents. So once the emailing system was finished, after a bit of cleanup, it was finally time to have more issues. Because of how little I know about linking and compiling and including libraries, I couldn't actually statically link the library required for Horizon, so I just hid it in the same folder. At this point, I was mentally torn from the emailing situation, and I just couldn't bring myself to be running in circles for another hour. There's a surprising amount to reflect on. So many mistakes were made in this project. Time management was an issue, perseverance, knowledge gaps, hubris. All of these culminated into the final product, which I genuinely feel almost empty about. The email part especially was the worst. I think the worst thing I did for this project was not keep an open mind. If I wasn't so stubborn, I would have finished it so much quicker, and I probably would have been able to link the executable file better without the need for libraries within the folder. I think the worst thing I did for this project was not keep an open mind. Especially in a field like security, there are always a million different ways to break into somewhere. If you keep doing the one thing over and over again, eventually it will be patched. Eventually you will be predictable, you will get caught, or you will get infected. A sizable portion of me is still disappointed in the outcome. The project could have been done quicker, it could have not required linking, the icon files could have actually worked, and the executable could have been disguised better. Features like supporting other keyboards, wormish behavior, and icon usage to disguise the program could have also helped a lot. In pursuit of perfection, I lost track of how far I'd come. I truly do believe this could be used to steal someone's information, and despite the amount of duct tape it has, and despite the multitude of problems it contains, it's still something I built from the ground up. While it pales in comparison to the projected design, it's still a functioning product that does its job, albeit with crutches in both arms. I think this project has taught me to appreciate what I can make and learn. I explored topics I never had before, learning MIME encoding to send a message, including libraries into C, communicating with SMTP to remotely send an email, and so much more. Not only that, the mistakes I made have emphasized my hubris and flaws and inability to read the fucking documentation. Regardless, I truly believe this project is an educational tool, essential in testing both one's programming, knowledge, and creativity, as well as exploring potential vulnerabilities and techniques hackers may exploit. While there is no catharsis from such a feat, no true release of the artist within, this project has served to expand my personal knowledge on a topic I genuinely enjoy.